Since the beginning of the colonial era, racism has been a raging issue in the United States of America. There have been many civil rights reforms and policies which have helped reduce racism to a great extent. But how effective were they? Every other day, there are news headlines about innocent people of a minority race being killed or harassed only because of their ethnicity. Unless you live under a rock, you might be familiar with the recent protests against police brutality towards people of color. With movements such as Black Lives Matter gaining momentum, there has been a lot of awareness lately throughout the country. There are some places where people belonging to different religions, ethnicities, and races thrive together in perfect harmony. On the other hand, there are cities where this kind of peace seems like a distant future, which will be quite difficult to achieve. So, which cities are these? Here is a list of the top 10 most racist cities in America. This data was collated on the basis of various factors, such as employment, the difference in wages among races, median incomes, land and home ownership, personal experiences shared via social media, and general public surveys. If you think any of the cities mentioned here are friendly and peaceful, do mention your experiences in the comments section below. Disclaimer: the aim of this video is not to spread hate, but to generate awareness and present facts. No personal opinions have been mentioned here. The statistical data available online has been used to make this list. Number 10. Fresno, California. California's fifth largest city, Fresno, has a history of racism and racist policies. Even today, a simple walk around the different neighborhoods will bring into light the kind of systemic racism the Black communities of Fresno suffer. First of all, you will be able to notice the presence of separate neighborhoods for different communities. The stark contrast in the standards of living between these communities will further stupefy you. While West Fresno suffers from severe neglect, the other parts of the city are well maintained and flourishing. West Fresno is majorly inhabited by non-whites and lacks amenities which are plentiful in other parts. Initially, after the railroads were built, towards the west of the tracks was the location where garbage dumps, factories, and slaughterhouses were built. The east side was where a majority of the whites lived, and they refused to rent out or sell houses to non-white residents of Fresno. As a result, the Chinese, Afro-Americans, Armenian, and other immigrant populations were cornered to the left. To this day, the originally Black neighborhoods are not being developed well by authorities. In addition to that, poverty and unemployment in the non-whites of Fresno is more widespread than the white population. Number 9. Kankakee, Illinois. Having more than 40% of its residents as Afro-Americans, it seems quite surprising that Kankakee would be a part of this list. However, social media pages based out of this city and some incidents have highlighted the perspectives of some of the citizens in this otherwise peaceful place. With the increase in gang violence and expenses in Chicago, many Afro-Americans migrated to Kankakee over the past few years. This explains the demographics of the city presently, which has over 50% whites and 40% Afro-Americans, with the remaining percentage including Mexicans and people of other races. When there were some fights between Blacks in the city, there was a lot of buzz on social media, especially with people posting racist comments, which implied that it was the Blacks who had brought the violence and drugs with them to the city. To address racism, an online community, Can I Help, was formed, which aims at removing systemic racism. In 2016, 5 high school athletes were expelled from school for posting racist comments. So Kankakee is progressing in the right direction, and hopefully it won't be a part of this list next time. Before moving on to the next city, can you guess what the most racist city in the US is? Stick to the end to find out. Number 8. Niles-Benton Harbor, Michigan. It might have become quite apparent from Fresno's example that Black communities in the city face racism and are one of the last groups to receive any aid. A similar situation can be witnessed in Niles-Benton Harbor, the only difference being it's much worse here. The Black community in Benton Harbor has raised environmental concerns, as even the most basic of their needs is not being met. The basic need being Water. Surprising, isn't it? Residents have complained about the odor and color of the tap water they get. There's a hospital in town that has also been known for segregation and racist treatment too. Coming back to the safe drinking water issues, it's not only the physical state of the water, which is a matter of concern. Lead, known to cause developmental delays in children, has been found in the drinking water of these towns. Allegedly, as the towns have a majority black population, they have suffered these issues. Number 7. Decatur, Illinois. The issue of racism in this place dates back to the early 1900s. Over a year ago, some real estate deeds were found that were discriminating towards people of color. However, this isn't a problem that was resolved back then, and it still exists to this date. Maps of Decatur were discovered, which were clearly used to segregate the cities and discriminate towards non-white population. These maps essentially serve the purpose of providing the federal authorities, banks, and other financial institutions with the racial demographics of a place. On the basis of this information, they would demarcate areas where obtaining loans were easier, so neighborhoods with majority black population would rarely get loans on good terms, while other neighborhoods could receive the loans with a greater ease. The fact that this is still a persistent issue speaks volumes about how much we have progressed as a society, doesn't it? Number 6. Elmira, New York. With about 25% of the population of Elmira comprising of non-whites, it seems pretty obvious that the minority races get concerned. But what you'll be told about now is far more concerning. The Southport Correction Facility. This was New York's first supermax prison, a place where prisoners are kept in completely isolated cells. And much to your surprise, the majority of inmates are non-whites. The majority here implies over 90%, though thankfully the prison closed March 11, 2022, as the state is soon planning on implementing laws that will limit the punishment of solitary confinement. That's one step towards progress. Number 5. Peoria, Indiana. About 27% of the residents of Peoria are black. Like other places on this list, Peoria has a long history of racism. Older citizens of Peoria have often recalled, on record, the racism they faced while looking for employment. Despite good qualifications, being rejected for a job only because of their ethnicity is something no one in the world would want to experience. However, this was a common occurrence for people of color. The south side of Peoria, which is majorly black, remains largely impoverished and unemployed even to this date. Number 4. Minneapolis, Minnesota. One of the most so-called progressive cities in the US, Minneapolis is largely regressive when it comes to racial equality. Having a predominantly white police force, instances of police brutality on people of color are not uncommon. What's worse is that there are rarely any measures taken to discipline police officers with such records, so these instances are not kept in check. There's a huge disparity between whites and blacks when it comes to housing, healthcare, and education in this city. Reportedly, people of color live in houses that are at quite lower rates as compared to whites. The horrific murder of George Floyd took place in this city, so it has one of the worst reputations of being racist. Number 3. Racine, Wisconsin. In Wisconsin has been on the list of most racist cities in America for a while now. There is an array of issues faced by people of color in this city, with huge differences in the median salaries of black and white households. A lot of Afro-Americans in Racine live in abject poverty. A major reason for this racial inequality can be attributed directly and indirectly to the economic gap. The economic gap also leads to a social gap, which in turn has led to this discrimination. Number 2. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee has one of the greatest racial disparities in the country, ranking it the second most racist city in the United States. This disparity exists in healthcare as well as unemployment. The median salary in black households of Milwaukee is far lower than that of white households. The socioeconomic differences have further widened the gap between people of color and whites when it comes to opportunities and amenities of education, employment, and healthcare. Coming to the worst city in the US for non-whites is Number 1. Waterloo-Cedar Falls, Iowa. Though the representatives and leaders of Waterloo condemn racism, it ranks as the number 1 city in this list of most racist cities in the US. One of the reasons for this is the raging unemployment among non-white residents. While the annual household income for blacks in this place is a little over $28,000, the median household income of whites is well over $57,000. This itself is proof enough for the gap between blacks and whites here. Poverty and the lack of amenities have left black communities of Waterloo helpless. Does Waterloo-Cedar Falls deserve the number 1 place in this list? Or do you know another city which could very well hold this unpleasant title? Mention your views in the comments section below.